Welcome to the And She Looked Up podcast. Each week, we sit down with inspiring Canadian women who create for a living. We talk about their creative journeys and their best business tips, as well as the creative and business mindset issues all creative entrepreneurs struggle with. I'm your host, Melissa Hartfield, and after leaving a 20-year career in corporate retail, I've been happily self-employed for 12 years. I'm a graphic designer, an illustrator, and a multi-six-figure-a-year entrepreneur in the digital content space. This podcast is for the artists, the makers, and the creatives who want to find a way to make a living doing what they love. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the And She Looked Up podcast. As always, I'm your host, Melissa, and this week I'm really excited to be welcoming Betty Shin Binon to the podcast. And for those of you who don't know Betty, she is a photographer who you may be more familiar with as Stems and Forks on Instagram. Welcome to the show, Betty.
Thanks for having me, Melissa.
I am excited to be chatting with you today. Betty and I have known each other for a little while through the food blogging scene initially. And for those of you who may not be familiar with her work, she originally built a successful, multifaceted brand after nearly 20 years in the floral design business. She sold that thriving business in 2013 to embrace a more balanced lifestyle with her family and immersion into all things creative. In 2017, Stems and Forks was established to showcase all her creative musings, recipes, photography, and botanical sculptures. And since the shift in her career, Betty's photography and video are highly sought after by brands for her distinct chiaroscuro, and I know I butchered that, style and visual storytelling. Her global workshops sell out to prominent artists and content creators around the world. And today we're going to be talking to her about her career. And we're also going to be talking about teaching what you know and what you do. And so that's where the workshop piece is going to come in. We're going to have a little conversation about that more towards the end of the interview. But for now, Betty, the question that I ask everybody first when they come on the podcast is, did you feel like you were creative as a kid?
Oh, that's a good question. I would say yes, I did feel it. I felt I was really into drawing, and my favorite art medium was oil pastels because my mother used to have a huge box that she brought from Korea. So they were really worn in and just these beautiful oil pastels. And so I used to do a lot of oil pastels and smudge and stuff and use Q-tips in my fingers. But that's kind of where I think the whole visual arts kind of, I suppose, blossomed.
So when you were growing up, did you do a lot of art creative things? Like where I'm going with this is that you right now, I would say, are a very multifaceted creative and you do a lot of different mediums. And I'm just kind of wondering where the background came for some of them, because you started your career in floral design.
I did. And so with the floral design was actually something that I did very reluctantly. So it's not something I share very often, but it is something that I think I started because, so the way it goes is my mother started this business, a floral business, when I was in junior high, and it didn't fare very well at a certain point. And so she asked me pretty much when I was just like out of high school, like 18, 19, if I could help for a couple years. So I did, and that was done with great reluctance.
Interesting. Okay.
Mm-hmm. So it was something that I got thrown into. I mean, obviously it was my choice, but it was something that I wasn't really gung-ho about, but I did it anyways. And I thought, okay, well, if I'm here, I might as well make the best of it, and kind of studied floral design and really built up the business.
So you wound up doing something that maybe wouldn't have been your first choice. Where did you think you were going to go after high school? Did you have an idea of something that you were really interested in and wanted to follow up on?
So I would say photography was definitely something that interested me. And of course, I am like a dinosaur. Back when I was in my late teens, photography was not digital. I mean, it was just starting, but it was not common. So I was working with primarily film, um, but I really enjoyed it. And I took some night school courses at George Brown, and I wanted to pursue, I suppose, photography. And I had this kind of crazy dream in my head since I was about 13, 14, that I wanted to make movies. So, I mean, the way I look at photography and video work is it can be very similar because they're visual stories.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I thought photography was more attainable and realistic, but that was kind of squashed with the flower business because the flower business was so, I mean, it took everything out of me. It was 100-hour weeks. It
Yeah.
was intense. It was intense.
It is a very hands-on business. I mean, and I know you certainly have times of the year where I'm sure you don't sleep for several days. I'm just thinking like Valentine's Day and Mother's Day plus weddings, you know, there's just I would think it's probably a pretty physically demanding career as well.
Yes, it is. It's very physically demanding and mentally demanding. I mean, I talked about this on another questionnaire with someone about how, I mean, actually to this day, I have nightmares about weddings, not making it on time, or waking up the day of the wedding and not having made anything and panicking. And I honestly wake up in the middle of the night and I go, oh my God, thank God that was a nightmare. And I go back to bed. So it's a lot of pressure. I mean, there's a lot of financial and emotional
Yeah.
investment that these bridegrooms put into that one day, and
Yeah.
it really hinges on the performance of all the vendors. So it is a lot of pressure. I'm so glad to be out of it.
I might be wrong, but did you not also have a chance to spend some time in Paris going to school? Or am I mixing that up with somebody else?
That's not me.
Okay.
I do go to Paris often.
Yes,
I've
you
taught
do.
workshops there, but and just traveled for fun, but I've never actually studied in Paris.
What made you decide? Because your floral business was very well known in the GTA and you were highly sought after. And I guess about 8 or 9 years ago, you decided that was enough and you decided to sell the business and move on to do something else. This is a really interesting conversation piece here because I'm going through the process of selling a business right now, and maybe we could just talk a little bit about that. I don't know if your situation was anything like mine, but I would imagine there was a fair amount of emotion wrapped up in that. In
Oh,
the act of
yes.
actually selling it. And I think this is something
Hmm.
we don't talk about it very often on the podcast or just in general, but the idea of closing a chapter and moving on to another chapter, particularly when you are selling the previous chapter, is something I think a lot of people don't necessarily plan for. We start these
Hmm.
businesses, right? And then we're like, yeah, I have this business, and then 10, 15, 20 years down the road we're kind of like, I don't want this business anymore. What do I do with it?
Right.
um,
Absolutely.
yeah, we don't kind of really future plan in that sense. And it's so then we either kind of are in this dilemma where we're like, do I let it go or do I just stay with it because I don't know what to do with it? And maybe you can just talk a little bit about what made you decide that it was time, and was it a hard decision to actually let it go, especially because your mom was involved in it in the like it was hers as well in the early days. And I don't know how you did the ownership piece moving forward, if the two of you co-owned it together till the end or if it moved on to just being yours, but I'm sure there was a lot of emotion wrapped up in that.
Many questions in there.
I know,
So,
sorry.
no, it's okay. So it was pretty difficult letting go of it. My mother and I did not co-own it. Initially, she was just the owner, and I just kind of, worked. And
Yeah.
every day I kept saying, okay, 2 more months, 1 month, 1 week, I just want to get out of here. But that those 2 years evolved into 18, 19 years. And every year it got harder to depart because I had employees that worked there and depended on a job there. They were
Right.
comfortable. I had my parents financially dependent on what I was doing. I mean, this is the first time I'm actually publicly sharing this information. I never did because out of respect for my parents. Um, but it was really hard because I had all these dependents, and I myself was dependent on it.
Yeah.
My husband had immigrated from Belgium, and I had a baby immediately after he had arrived here, and he was at home taking care of my first daughter, and I was working. So this flower shop was like the breadwinner for so many people, including myself.
Yeah.
So to part ways with it took an immense amount of, I'm going to say it, courage and guts on
Yes,
my
it
part.
does. It absolutely does.
And it was extremely emotional for me because I spent almost 2 decades to this thing that I had always called my child. It was so much blood, sweat, and tears and hard work. And I had built this clientele that, I had done their weddings, I had done their kids, baptismals or bar mitzvahs. And it was sad to let that go, but it was something I needed to do. It was overdue. I should have left a lot earlier, but I try not to think about that too much these days because it's just a rabbit hole I try to avoid now. So yes, it was difficult. I'm taking way too long to explain this, but
No, no, this is good. And I completely relate to it. I think we all know, whether we want to admit it or not, we all kind of know when the tide has turned. There's that little tugging that's going on, in your brain that I want to go over here. I want to do this. I want to, and you kind of try to keep it quiet because you're like, I have this thing and it's doing really well. And I don't hate it, but it feeds me, and it feeds my family, and it feeds other people, and it's not that bad. I could be working in an office. That would be really horrible. No offense to those people who work in offices, but
oh gosh.
So it's and yet at the same time you feel that tugging in the background, just saying, Melissa, Betty, come over here. Let's do something else, and it's tough. It's a tough thing to go through. Plus, as you said, it becomes your child, and poured all this blood, sweat, and tears into it. At a certain point, it's very difficult to let go. And you're right. It takes courage because you are giving up things and things that are successful and things that are working for you to go do something that is a big unknown. That you could fall on your face or fail, or it could not feed you. All those things. So it's a lot to process, and it's a lot to actually take that step, I think, for many of us. So what was it that ultimately made you say, yes, it's time? Like, was there a moment that you had?
There was several moments. I think the ultimate push was, again, this is TMI, but I had a miscarriage. And I was older. I was about 37 or 38.
Mm-hmm.
So that's considered to be, an older mom. And I thought, I'm trying to have the second child kind of later in my years. And then that part later in my years really hit home, and I thought, God, I'm approaching middle age and I'm still doing this. I'm still doing this that I want, like this thing that I wanted to get out of in my early 20s. And here I am, late in the season of my life, still trying to figure my crap out. I gotta get out of here. I gotta stop this. Like, when is it going to be too late? When I'm 65?
Yeah.
So I thought, this is it. It's now or never. You just got to do it. And there's something about myself. I do recognize that I'm an extremely hard worker. So I thought to myself, like, how can I fail if I start something else? You know, I was still terrified, but I just kept thinking, if I work hard and I have the sensibilities about myself to know if something is realistic or not,
Hmm.
then how can I fail? You know, and perhaps that sounds really cocky,
No, I don't think
but
so. I mean, as somebody from the outside, you are extremely hardworking, and I think most people who've had the opportunity to work with you have seen that. So I don't think that's cocky, but I do think you had almost 20 years of experience running a business. Like that counts for something. Like there has to be something in that if you leave, right?
yeah, I hope so at the time, but like I said, I was still frightened because
Hmm.
I didn't know anything else.
Yeah,
I mean, this is something that I had worked in since I was a teenager.
yeah.
I didn't know anything else, so I was terrified. And it took a couple years just to get, you know, the photography business going. At the same time, I was nursing a child. I had had George, so um, I was at home. I was cooking a lot, and I thought this is a great. Maybe this is how I should incorporate my photography with my cooking, and that's kind of how the whole stems and forks started.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and if you ever have the opportunity to sample some of Betty's baked goods, I highly recommend them. She's very generous. If you ever have the opportunity to work with her or do anything with her, she always comes with a little parcel of goodies. It's always.
I, I can't remember. Did I give you something? Did I
Oh yeah, yeah,
bring you a treat? Oh,
yeah,
okay, good,
yeah,
good.
yeah. And once you
Amazing.
didn't, and you apologized profusely for about half an hour, I was like, "It's fine."
Oh gosh,
But
okay.
yes, you have brought me treats in the past.
Very good.
Yes,
Very good.
they were very good. Yes.
Awesome.
So once you had made this decision that you were going to move forward. So you started Stems and Forks, which I guess the best way to describe it that most people would understand is it was a food blog in the beginning, but it was a food blog that was different in the sense that you had this very different aesthetic from what was out there. It was, you just had this style, and it was so obvious that the joy for you was as much the photography as it was the actual act of baking and sharing the recipes. And I think that is something that you became very well known for very quickly. I think that would be fair to say. You stood out, so people noticed, and it was very different from what, because at the time everybody was doing these very bright, almost overexposed food photography, and you came along with this very dark, I don't want to say moody, but it was kind of moody, but it was very,
Hmm.
the thing about your photography that I have always noticed from the beginning is that I feel like I'm looking at a Renaissance painting when I look at your photos. And it's,
Wow.
and I think
Thank
this
you.
is where I'm going to say this word wrong again, the chiaroscuro style. And maybe you could talk a little bit about what that is for people in our audience who don't have an art or an art history background. But it's a very specific style, and it really is a great word to describe your work.
Thank you. Gosh, so many kind words from you. Thank you, Melissa. I, oh, what was the question again?
Oh, could you tell us what? Oh, you're going to make me say this word again.
Oh,
Chiaroscuro style is, so that people understand kind of what that means.
so I think the chiaroscuro
Oh,
style
you
is
say it so much better than me.
basically chiaroscuro is the contrast of light and shadow.
Yes.
Uh, that's, you know, in a nutshell, that's
Yeah.
what it is. So I'm when I take photographs, I really try to emphasize the strong contrast between light and dark. I find that I'm really attracted to photographs that have that.
Yes.
I mean, I like the bright as well, but if I had to choose, I would prefer these works of art where there's a strong contrast between light and dark, between shadow and light.
Yeah, I think if you have ever been in, for our listeners, if you've ever been in an art gallery or a museum and you've walked through like the Renaissance wing, or if you've been to a Renaissance, a a show that focuses on a Renaissance painter, you'll notice that the paintings, and it doesn't always come across in a photograph of the painting, but when you're next to the painting, it almost feels like it's lit from within. And you really do get that feeling of light and shadow and contrast, and that is very much what your paintings are like. And like I said, the first time that I saw your work, I was like, wow, this looks like a painting, which was very different. And like I said, you got a lot of attention from that because it was different. That's something to take away from this. I know a lot of people always try to force their creativity, I guess, for lack of a better word, into what is commercially viable because it's popular right now. And sometimes being the person who's different is what will actually get you the attention, because I think a lot of people are always looking for something that, whether it's music and it has a different sound, or it's visual and it has a different look, or it's written and it has a different style of prose, people are kind of like, this is different. I'm curious about this. I want to know more. So, and I think that was kind of what happened when you hit the scene. You were like, wow, this is different. Who is this person? But
thank you. Oh my gosh. I actually disagree with you. I don't think I'm original at all. I thought,
really? I think maybe in the food scene you are, but I had not seen work like yours in the niche that we were in at the time. It was it was something, I mean, I suppose maybe next to a Renaissance painter it's not original, but I think I think what you do is quite different from, and you execute it very well too. I think that's also part of the key.
I think that is the key, is the execution. So that whole dark contrast between light and dark look, I feel like there are quite a number of photographers and artists who do that and do it very well. But I think it's in the execution. It's, how do you style the scene, or how are things, positioned, or how do you make that chiaroscuro look unique today? Yeah. And that's a constant struggle for me as well. It's just trying to constantly push myself to add that edge. And it's not just to stand out, but it's just for myself as well. Because I think in the conversation we had just before we started this podcast was, I sometimes get irritated with my own work because I think, Betty, I've seen that, I've seen it. So I'm getting a little bored and tired with what I'm doing. So it's just for me just to have something fresh, and so that kind of gives me drive and pushes me along.
How did videography enter the picture for you? Because you've started to do more and more video in the last few years, and I'm just thinking back to earlier in the interview where you said that when you were younger, making movies or short films was very appealing to you, and here you are making some very unique videos as well.
Thank you. I started doing video during the pandemic. So last year, I want to say just slightly before I started to study Adobe Premiere Pro, which is a video editing tool. And I watched a ton of YouTube videos, and I just kind of, played around, not posting anything, but just to practice. And then once the pandemic hit and business kind of slowed down initially in the beginning, I had this time and I thought, this is a great opportunity to really refine my video skills. And so I really immersed myself. Like every day I made it, I put it in my schedule to spend at least 2 hours educating myself on video work. And it paid off. I mean, now I am getting hired for video work. So, and I actually love it. I thoroughly enjoy video work just as much, dare I say, maybe a little bit more than photography. Because there's so many different facets to video work. I mean, photography is it's just you point and shoot. I mean, there's more to that, obviously,
Right.
but the storytelling is very different than, I'm contradicting myself. Earlier, I said it's the same, but it is a little different because you are freezing one frame. So in some ways, it's less forgiving because you just have this one image in a photograph and
Mm-hmm.
it's got to be, damn perfect. Video, it's a little different because it's moving images. It's a little bit more forgiving. Moments could be blurry. Things in the scene don't have to be perfectly aligned because in 1 second that frame is going to change into another frame. So there's more flexibility,
Mm-hmm.
in my opinion, with video.
No, I think you're right. I have only dabbled in video, but the part that I've always really enjoyed is the editing process, more so than the filming. And I get the sense just from seeing your work and from having a little bit of background in photography and video that you enjoy the editing piece as much as the filming or the shooting piece. That's just a sense that I get from seeing your work.
I do. I love editing. You feel like a magician because you
Yes.
went from this like bland image with, very unsaturated colors to like, wow, it's just transformed. You just made that ugly duckling beautiful now. So it's a lot of fun just to see that transformation, happening.
It is. I've always said that editing is as much an art form as taking the actual photograph or filming the actual video.
Oh, for sure, for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. It's
Yes.
like you said, it's quite magical when when it all goes right, and you're like, wow, that's what I saw in my head when I started out.
Exactly. Yeah, I love it. I love it.
Where do you work? Do you work from home, or do you have a studio space, or
I work from home, so my studio is my family room.
oh, there we
I
go.
yeah, I strung up some curtains and I have a little office adjacent to the studio, the family room. So I use two rooms. I mean, my studio is not large. It's maybe 10 meters by 4 meters. So it's not large, but it's not tiny. Uh, but it is tight with all my stuff in there.
Right. Yes. Did you find you had to invest a lot more into new equipment when you started doing video, or did you just start with what you had?
I didn't invest in anything except for paying Adobe an extra 15 bucks US a month for Premiere Pro.
Premiere.
That's it. Yeah. So, oh, actually, I did buy a gimbal, but the funny thing about the gimbal is I spent 500 bucks on this gimbal, and then I went, well, who's going to carry it, Betty, while you're doing stuff? So I just use it when I go out and I take these nice, nature shots or whatever. But other than that, I mean, I'm a one-woman show. No one's shooting me. So, I mean, this gimbal was not a good investment on my part. But that's it. Yeah.
Oh, you'll have to snap it onto the collar of one of the dogs or something. I watch a lot of YouTube videos of dogs, and they're very good with gimbals and what's the other one? Oh my goodness, I have one and I can't think of the name of it.
Tripods or something?
No, the
Or
little cameras. You can use them underwater, and you can. Oh my
oh,
goodness.
Go
GoPros.
something.
There you go.
GoPros, that's it.
See lots of videos with. I was actually watching. It is a dog account, but the fellow who runs it decided to show everybody how he makes the dog biscuits that he gives his dogs, and if you have a dog, they are one of your kids.
They are kids, yeah.
And he just snapped and I thought, oh, this is going to be interesting because in the food blogging world, everybody tries to make their videos as professional as possible, and it's all about quality, and that's very important. But he just slapped this GoPro to his head, and so he could look down and you could see his hands, and he shot this video of himself making dog biscuits, and I was like, you know what? It worked.
It was must have been a little Blair Witchy though, and shaky,
It wasn't bad. It wasn't bad
Oh,
at all.
really?
So I was actually
Oh.
really impressed, but I just thought that was, we sit here sometimes and we kind of obsess about our gear. And I was like, he had a GoPro, so that's what he used, and it worked. And
Awesome. I'm a big believer that you don't need good gear. I mean, whenever I tell people what I own, they're shocked
Thank
because I
you.
don't own a lot. I
Thank
have
you.
two lenses. That's it, two lenses.
Wow,
That's
really?
all
Okay.
that's all I have. And I know I have colleagues, photography colleagues that have for other photographers that have, about half a dozen to a dozen lenses, all each ranging from like $600 and upwards
Yeah.
to a couple thousand. But, I found that so far my two lenses have been just fine. I mean, right now I'm getting more into landscape photography just for my own interest, so I might invest in a 16 millimeter, but for now, the two lenses I have just serve me fine.
That's all I have too. Two lenses. I have a good camera, so I'm quite happy with that. But yeah, two lenses. That's it.
Awesome. That's all you need. One or two lenses, yeah.
It really is. I think there's a photographer that I follow, and he has a saying about it, and I have completely forgotten what it is. Anyway, I might edit that out.
No worries.
But
No
it's
worries.
basically his whole philosophy is that, oh, it's gear is good, vision is better. That's his whole philosophy. Yes,
Gear
that's
is
it.
good, vision is better.
Yeah,
Interesting.
it's,
Yeah.
David
That
Duchemin,
is
who I've mentioned a few times on. He does a lot of photography work for NGOs all over the world, and that's his philosophy. Gear is good, but vision is better, and it's very true.
I totally agree with him. Yeah, for sure.
You started out showing your work on your blog, and you were combining it with your love of food and your love of floral design. And your early work really did incorporate the two a lot. But your work now is almost exclusively on social media, particularly Instagram. What is it that pulls you to social media? Because I know a lot of people have a bit of a love-hate relationship with social media, but that's been your home, and I think that's probably where most people know you from at this point. Yeah, so what is it that drew you to social media and to Instagram in particular?
Well, the blog, I'm just gonna say it takes up so much time.
Yes.
It's like you gotta take multiple photographs, you have to write something, and you need to write the recipe. It came to a point where between being a mother, working full time, I just couldn't handle it anymore. So I just stuck to Instagram. And the other thing is, it was a business decision. I was getting most of my business via Instagram
Mm-hmm.
and not from my blog. So my blog is really just a place where I kind of park information if I'm hosting a workshop and people need more information than just like the, what is it, 400 or 500 word caption in Instagram.
Right.
So then I'll put that information on my website as well. I find that, you still need a web page. I mean, it kind of gives you credibility that
Mm-hmm.
you have this. It's like a virtual storefront. So
Yes, it's like a portfolio site in a way, kind of like,
yeah,
here's Betty, here's what she does, and
right,
yeah.
right. And I had lots more time. I had like way more time in the beginning when
Mm-hmm.
I started Stems and Forks to write these blogs. But then once I started to get business, I no longer had that time to leisurely write up a recipe and take multiple photographs, plus write a blog post about it.
Yeah. I also don't think people realize the amount of technical work that goes on behind the scenes of keeping up a blog. There's so much stuff that you have to be aware of that, quite frankly, for a lot of creatives is not interesting. Things like SEO and all that. For a
Oh,
lot of us, we
yeah.
just can't. That's not why we're doing what we do. So I can completely understand that. So you actually, my next question was going to be, when did the client work start to come? And you just mentioned in your answer there that you were starting to get inquiries through Instagram for paid work. At this point, do you actively seek out client partnerships, or is it mostly people coming to find you?
So I've never actively looked for clients. I wanted to start off. So if you really scroll down to the bottom of my blog or my Instagram page, my photographs are garbage. I mean,
Everybody, I think everybody feels that way.
It's sad. I mean, if I could, I'd probably wipe them all out, but I figure, it's not good to do that. I've got to have something down there. So I started off with the idea of this is a business where I don't actually have a storefront, it's not a bricks and mortar, it's
Mhm.
something that's virtual and it doesn't cost a lot of money other than having this web page that I need to pay to be hosted, which is $25 a month. So it's not a lot of money. And coming from a flower business where I was paying, X amount of dollars every month just in basic utilities, the way I looked at it was I'm going to spend 2 years reacquainting myself with photography and learning how to take digital photographs, and then learning how to do visual storytelling with food and within my photographs. And I'm going to take 2 years teaching myself this process. If I don't get it in 2 years, I'm exiting. And I base that 2 years on that's kind of the consensus of how long it takes to start up a business,
Mhm.
right? They say 2, 3 years of lost revenue. So I looked at it as I'm not losing revenue, but I'm not making any revenue. So this is actually not a bad business decision.
Right.
So at the same time, I had just gotten out of the flower business. I had a baby, Georgie. So I thought this is perfect timing. It's now or never. So I did it for 2 years and I started to get better. And then the first client, which was actually Metro Ontario, a big grocery chain, approached me and I went, "Oh, this is amazing. Um, let's try it." So after they had hired me, I guess that gave me a lot of credibility because
Mhm.
they are such a huge grocery chain. And from there, I started to gain more clients, and then people started to hire me for things like ads, things like product photography, and it just kind of grew from there. So I really liked that gradual growth as opposed to all of a sudden, I start the blog and bang, I'm going to start looking for clients. I also don't think that's the correct way of going about a business because I kind of made mistakes along the way. Does that make sense? Like I kind of, it's like I started not knowing much and then taught myself, made mistakes, had failures. And then once I was a little more established and confident, I started to get business.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point to make because I do think a lot of people, when they get the idea that they want to start a business, particularly in a creative field, but any business really, is that there's going to be this instant moment where people, all the people are going to come. And I
Yeah.
see this all the time in particularly in the Etsy world because I sell a lot of my work on Etsy and in Etsy groups or forums and things, and you'll see somebody come on and say, "I've had my shop open for a month and I haven't had a single sale. I'm ready to give up." And I think there's this kind of almost myth that's out there, and I think we
Hmm.
see a lot of this on the internet. We see a lot of people selling us the dream, sign up for my course and you'll have 20 clients within within 6 weeks kind of thing. And that very rarely happens. And I think when a lot of people start out and they don't get those first few sales or those first few clients almost immediately, it's really devastating to them because they just thought they would put it out there and they would come. And they will come, but you referred back to how if you go back and look at those early photographs, like, oh, you just want to cringe, right? But
Yeah.
I think anybody in the creative arts can say that about their work. I mean, that is part of learning your craft. It's part of learning your style. Style doesn't just necessarily show up. It's sort of something that evolves as you evolve and as your skill level evolves, and you're better able to take that image in your head. You have more skills to take the image in your head and get it out into the world, which I think can also be very frustrating when you first start out. You have this image in your head, but your skills aren't quite there yet, and
Hmm.
nothing comes out the way you see it in your head, and it can be very demoralizing. So I
Oh gosh,
think
yes.
um, I think what you did is actually a really smart way to go about it, is to give yourself this time. And I loved what you said about how most businesses do not make money in the first 2 to 3 years. I think 3 years is like the magic number where, most, what did they say? Most brand new businesses don't make it past the 3 year mark. And if you kind of get past that, it means you're probably on the right track. But I think where I was going with this,
I think it's what you said earlier, which is people think if you build it, that field of dreams quote, if you build it, they will come instantly. But no, it's not instant. It takes time. And you're right. I think it is the 3 year mark. It takes time to build a business, and you won't make money right away. And if you do, you just got lucky. That's really what it is. But you have to give yourself time. And I think that time is great because then you can really, like we both agree, build yourself and learn more about your skill and really get to know what it is that you're trying to offer.
Absolutely.
So I think that's the key. And whenever I do these workshops, the question I get the most often out of everyone is, how do I get a lot of followers and fast on Instagram?
And the eternal question.
I can't stand that question because it's like, well, why do you want a lot of Instagram followers and fast? Why, answer me or answer yourself that question and let's go from there. But anyways.
Yes, and we're gonna get into that in a moment. I do think, to be clear, you do need to build the thing. They can't come if you don't build the thing.
Yes,
but
it won't be instant.
It won't be instant. Yes, that's the thing. And I think what I was going with there is the way you framed it is that if most businesses don't make money in the first few years, yes, this is a sound business decision to actually give myself this grace period of 2 years to improve my skills, to improve the work that I'm doing, to get my work out there, to become known, and then then we'll go in full force and hopefully start to do more and more client work. But most people don't give themselves that grace period. It's like, I need to do this and I need to do it now. But I think it is a sound business decision when you think about it from a numbers standpoint and how most businesses actually operate in their first couple of years. So, So that was a good point. Yes. So let's dive into teaching, because you teach a lot. You, I know that since the pandemic has started, a lot of your in-person workshops have had to be put on hold. But prior to that, you have done workshops both locally in the GTA, but also internationally, and you frequently sell out. And one of the things that we have talked about in past episodes, myself and Heather Travis, quite frequently, is multiple streams of revenue and things like that, and how teaching can be a very sound way to create another stream of revenue and to also build your community, which I think a lot of people forget. Mm-hmm. But part of teaching and part of the pushback we always get on that is, well, I don't, if I teach what I do, then I'm increasing my competition, kind of thing. And I've always found it very interesting because a lot of what you teach is essentially your style. And yet you have never seemingly been worried about people competing with you or anything like that. Like I've always admired the confidence you have in your own abilities, and that you feel, I'm not being articulate about this, but that
no, you are. I totally understand.
Yeah, that you have the confidence in your abilities, that you're not afraid to go out there and show other people how to do what it is you do. And so maybe we can talk a little bit about those things. Like, did that ever enter your mind when the first idea of teaching what you do? Like, did you ever have a moment where you're like, well, if I teach people, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I should keep all my secrets to myself.
I'm not one to hold back on all my trade secrets. So if someone is willing to pay me, you know, hundreds, if not sometimes some of these workshops could be thousands of
Hmm.
dollars, I will give you everything. And it doesn't frighten me because we're all different. And what I teach them, are just tools. It's up to them to take those tools and apply it to however they want to in their creative world. And I don't think I've ever felt threatened or uh, I don't know what other word there is to describe it, but I don't feel I don't mind it at all. I actually I really do enjoy sharing my knowledge and seeing, gosh, I'm not being articulate either here. I could give you an example of one
Sure. Yeah.
young lady who took a workshop with me in Paris. When she came in, she expressed, she had talent, definitely had talent, but she didn't really know what it was that she needed to push herself to find her style, and her editing skills were just a little bit, limited. So I remember during that workshop, she was so eager to learn. And then after that, I just saw her blossom into this incredible creative. And I always think of her because I'm like, that makes me so happy that
Hmm.
I was part of that journey, part of her journey to thrive. And she doesn't like her work doesn't look anything like mine. She really made it her own. Um, so I don't feel threatened or anything like competitive or anything from teaching all my trade secrets. No.
I think you hit the nail on the head there. I think that's the thing. You can teach your style, you can teach your technique, but everybody interprets things differently. And while they may mimic what you do in the initial stages, eventually, as they get more confident in their skills, they're going to create their own style. And it is going to look very different from what you do because they're different from you. And I think sometimes we just get so frightened or worried about people copying our work. And I don't know. I always feel like they can copy your work, but they can't copy what's in your head. What you're going to do next, right? They don't...
That's true. Yeah, that's I think you just summed it up perfectly. You you said it way more eloquently than I did. So yes, that's whatever you said, that's what it is.
What made you decide to start teaching workshops? Was that something that had always been a goal for you? Did you do that with your floral work as well?
No, the floral work, I mean, I was just too busy
Yeah.
with actual business. Uh, I don't know. I can't remember what made me. I think it was because I know what started it. It was my friend Elise who has the Pineapple Chef in Paris.
Right.
She
Yes.
she invited me to teach a workshop with her. And so it started from there. And I think I remember getting this like kind of rush of like joy from being around fellow, you know, food photographers and of course being in Paris. I mean, it was
Yeah.
bliss, right? So it was that it was that first time I taught a workshop. I really enjoyed that time, and I remember thinking, I want to do this again and again and again. So that kind of launched it.
Did you do any? We were talking before we started that we're tired of saying the word pivot regarding this pandemic, but but when the pandemic obviously you couldn't teach in person for quite some time. Did you do any online teaching, or is that something that has just gone on the back burner for you for now?
I did. I did some online teaching. I still am with a couple of students. And it's funny because since TikTok exploded and Reels on Instagram has taken off, people are now asking me not for photography lessons, but video lessons.
Oh,
So
interesting.
the last I would say six students I had in the past year have every single one. I mean, maybe one or two have asked for photography tips, but they really wanted to focus on videography.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting because, like I said, I just started teaching myself last year, February. So I can't call myself a pro. But because I'm teaching people who have zero experience, it's worked out because I'm teaching them things that I taught myself last year, if that makes sense.
Well, that's the thing with teaching. I think we often think we don't have the skills to teach something. But the thing is, very often there's somebody who's earlier on in the journey than you are. And to them,
Yes,
you're a master. It's like, wow, look at what she's
that's
doing.
right.
You know?
Shh, don't tell anyone, okay? I'm not a master.
That's the great thing about creativity and art is there's always somebody who can learn from you and there is always somebody you can learn from. Like it's just kind of this never-ending cycle of being able to learn from somebody. So
Oh, and that's the thing. I'm forever teaching myself and learning something.
yeah.
Even photography. I can't say I'm a master of anything. I'm continuously learning all my skills that photography
Yeah.
and video. I mean, it's a constant learning journey. And I remember meeting one food blogger who said to me, um, I'm good. I've got it all down and I know everything about photography. And I thought, really? Do you really? Because I really think we can all, I think life in general, we are constantly learning, right?
Absolutely.
Every day
Yeah.
is a learning journey. So,
What did they say? If you're not learning, you're standing still. So there
ah,
you go.
yes, there you
Right.
go. Yeah.
Are you actually on TikTok? Do you use TikTok at all? I'm not on TikTok. I'm like an old lady, so I don't I don't do TikTok.
I am an old lady too. Well, you're not. You're not. I am. I am on TikTok, but I rarely go on. Like I go in there and I dump 6 videos in a row and then I'll tap out and I won't check in for like 6 months and then again go in and dump like, 3 more videos and it's really I just have it there because I figure I gotta have an account with
Yeah,
my
I
name
do
on
have an
it.
account, but all it showed me when I signed up was like police training videos. Like dog
What?
training, like which I
Oh
love
God.
dogs, so I mean it was fun. But now I'm kind of like, yeah, you know what? I need to find other things to watch. I don't know why it recommended that to me, but that seemed to be where I got stuck with it.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of TikTok. I know it's a huge platform right now. I
Hmm.
do watch a couple of people just because I'm friends with them. So when I do tap in, I'll watch my friends. But these are people who showcase their videos on Instagram as well. So I
Hmm.
kind of,
You
I don't
can't.
spend too much time
Yeah.
on there, to be honest.
Yeah, I was just curious because I do know that in the art world, TikTok has become really popular as a way to teach, showing quick little hacks and tips and things. And so I just wondered if maybe that was an avenue you had considered.
I don't, yeah, I'm really, I like it one-on-one
Yeah.
or in an intimate setting. Also, I just don't. I mean, here I am doing this podcast, but I don't like my voice. I don't. I know
Okay.
everyone says they cringe, but I
It's so
just
true. Yes, but you have a great voice.
thank you. But I have no illusions about myself, right? So I know my voice is not lovely. I'm not an eloquent speaker. Most days I feel like a fumbling Woody Allen, if I'm allowed to use his name anymore. I feel like a fumbling idiot when I speak. So I'm not really big on narrating or even showing my face.
Oh,
So
so funny.
TikTok teaching online, I mean, like if it's not, you know, private classes,
Yeah.
I just can't see myself doing it, to be honest.
Fair
Sorry.
enough.
You could
It's not a,
you could cut that out.
no, it's it's not like I said, it's not a platform that I've been super excited about. I do like seeing some of the TikToks that pop up on Instagram and stuff. Some of them are quite funny and some of them are quite clever. It's just not something I've been interested in, but I am really intrigued by YouTube and I've started playing around doing some studio style vlogs and things on YouTube because I enjoy watching those and I could see your work doing really well on YouTube as well. Um, yeah, so it's kind of there's
I'll have
always
to check you out.
yeah, it seriously. I have like 15 followers. Um, and
15
it's just
dedicated followers.
I haven't posted anything in a while. The one thing that keeps me away from doing more of it is just the actual time it takes. Like you can't do all the things, right? You kind of have to choose the things that you're going to do. But I've always enjoyed the editing aspect of video. I don't have patience with the shooting part of it, but I really enjoy sitting down and putting all those clips together and making something out of all these pieces.
It's fun.
It
yes,
is. It's a lot of fun. Yeah. If we could go back to the workshop piece before we wrap up, I was just curious because I know that as we sort of start to come out of this pandemic and, well, I think we're going to be with it for a while, but things are opening up. We are able to do a few more things in person. I don't know if you have plans to go back to teaching in person, but I know that a lot of people who listen to this are starting to think about hosting workshops and small retreats and things like that. And I was wondering if you have any tips about running a good workshop or getting comfortable with the idea of even doing a workshop if it's not your thing.
I would say I would love to start teaching workshops again, but I am nervous. I'm nervous about not so much me catching anything, but I'm nervous about COVID-19 basically, and if someone were to catch it, because most of the workshops I host actually here in Toronto, the participants are not Canadian. The majority of them, like 9 out of 10, are American.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yes. It's mainly Americans, so they would have to travel here.
Traveling to you, yeah.
I've thought about that often as to why Americans are more attracted to learning than Canadians, and I think it just comes down to Canadians are very practical, and they're not risk takers. So the idea of spending X amount of dollars on how to style food or editing or something like that, I think they're just frugal.
Yes. I would agree.
And they're not risk takers, and it's very different. So I do get more Americans. Now I'm kind of straying from the original question, but I just wanted to mention as well, once when I did a workshop in Paris, there was a couple ladies that attended on 2 different occasions that just attended, not because they were photographers, but just to be in the ambiance of artists, which I thought was incredible.
Oh, that's so funny. We did a workshop in New Brunswick a couple years ago. Exact same thing. These 2 women came who were not really, they just wanted to come, see what it was all about. They paid the ticket.
Fun?
Yeah, I'm like, that's so interesting.
I love it.
To me.
Yeah, it's like for no practical reason except just to be in that community, in that environment, which I love. Yeah. But in terms of setting up a good workshop, I would say the best advice is, and it kind of goes back to that question you had asked earlier, which is don't be cheap about your knowledge. Give it all. Yeah. Just give it all. Share with people. I mean, people are, and the reason why I'm saying this, I think, is because I've heard from other participants who've attended other workshops, and their biggest complaint is always they spent X amount of dollars and they didn't really retain anything, retain any good information or knowledge from that workshop. Yeah. And it made me realize that I think it has to do with that insecurity of the person who was leading that workshop of not wanting to give too much out.
Yeah, they're brushing the surface kind of thing, not diving.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, that's my advice. Just give it all.
Yeah, I agree. I agree 100%. I think people will gravitate to you. Yes, people are intelligent. They know when they're being when things are being skimmed over and when they're not getting the good stuff. And especially if they've paid a lot of money to be there, like there is an expectation of an exchange, right?
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. Yes. So, but I think when you are generous with your knowledge, the vast majority of people, I know there's always those 1 or 2 people who will try to take advantage, and that seems to be what people get focused on. But the vast majority will be so appreciative of what you've given them, because essentially you're giving them skills to further what they're passionate about. they'll be so appreciative, and you have a fan for life. And very often they will come to your next workshop, or they'll tell their friends about it, and that's how you kind of keep the ball rolling.
Oh, definitely. Yes. And that's the thing with workshops. I mean, I have regulars. I have this couple that comes to workshops I hold all over the world, and they're my regulars because with each workshop I have gained new knowledge and information between the last time I
You've
spoke to
grown
them.
too.
And, you know, yeah, exactly. So it's great.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Betty. It was so wonderful to have you here today. And it's been a long time since we've had an opportunity to catch up. So I really appreciated just getting to chat. It was lovely. Before we wrap up, can you give us a hint as to what's next for you? Do you have anything interesting going on that you can share?
Well, oh, by the way, thank you for having me. I always find it so strange and kind of nice that people are interested in my life. So I guess what I'm working on next is right now I'm just doing tons of client work, content creation for various brands and companies. But in between, whenever I have a chance, I am writing a screenplay. So,
oh wow, that's cool.
yes. So I just thought I gotta do this. I gotta take the dive and, have a go at it and see what happens.
Oh, that's very cool. Can you tell us anything about it, or are you keeping it? If you're keeping it under wraps, I can edit this out. That's totally fine.
No, it's I don't think I've actually spoken about it with very many people, but it's without saying out the synopsis, it's pretty much I decided to write something that I'm familiar with. So that's the flower business.
Okay.
And so it's about a blind florist.
Oh, interesting.
Yes, in a small community, and I based it out of Elora. I don't know why.
Oh,
I just
Elora is
think
such a pretty little town too. Yeah.
It is. It is. So I just thought that would be a perfect backdrop to a story about a blind florist who's like a recluse and angry at the world.
Interesting. I have an uncle, a great uncle who was a blind piano tuner. So
how amazing is that? Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So that kind of just made me think of that. I don't know why. I haven't thought about him in eons. Oh, that's really cool. I'm excited to see what comes of that. So, yeah, it's always nice to have like a little passion project going on the side, keeps you fresh and keeps the creative juices going. All right. Well, we have come up on the hour, everybody. And so, yes, Betty, thank you once again. It was such a pleasure to have you here and for sharing your story with the audience. And for all of you who have been listening, that's it for this week. We'll be back next week with another brand new episode, and we'll talk to you all then. Thank you so much for joining us for the And She Looked Up Creative Hour. If you're looking for links or resources mentioned in this episode, you can find detailed show notes on our website at andshelookedup.com. While you're there, be sure to sign up for our newsletter for more business tips, profiles of inspiring Canadian creative women, and so much more. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe to the show via your podcast app of choice so you never miss an episode. We always love to hear from you, so we'd love it if you'd leave us a review through iTunes or Apple Podcasts. Drop us a note via our website at andshelookedup.com or come say hi on Instagram at andshelookedup. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.